Hello everyone. Evan Abrams here, back on Adobe Live for more video challenges. All this week, I'll be challenging you to make things in Adobe After Effects. After Effects, of course, where we make a lot of motion design, make a lot of motion happen. So today we are going to be creating animated maps, or as the yeahs say, maps. No one knows who the yeahs are anymore. So we're going to be creating a map. We're going to be animating a little path through it. We're going to pop up some little labels on it. I'm getting over a terrible head and chest cold, so my voice might sound a little bit weird. Do let me know if I need to bump the sliders in any way. Let's see, do I have anything else? If you want files to work from, if we're going to animate maps, we need to have maps. So we have a lovely map of Madrid that we can enjoy. You can find those files down in the description. And also, I want to see your routes that you take through the city here. I want to see your camera moves and all that stuff. I want you to share with me what you make. So please use the link in the description to also join the Discord. Well, look, we're over there sharing the Premiere Discord, us After Effecties. So we can share our stuff over there. And we'll have a look at them all on Friday. All right. So good to see people hanging out. Laura, Jack, hello, Penny, Steve. Oh man, Anki, Enki. Let me know if I'm pronouncing that name right. But we have a first timer here doing video, so I hope that we explain it in ways that will be helpful for you. So if you haven't opened up After Effects before, we're gonna be taking it slow. All right, one project at a time. And this, he said, sharing the screen, is a great project to get you really started and comfortable moving a 3D camera around. This was one of the projects that I always try to get students to do if they are sort of new to creating things in After Effects in 3D and getting accustomed to this system. So we've got a map, we've got a path that draws onto the map, we've got labels that are popping up on the map, and we're orbiting a camera around to new angles, right? So this is the general idea, and the workflow that we want to do. We're going to start two-dimensionally. We're going to get our two-dimensional things happening. We're then going to observe that through a 3D lens, and then we'll bring our 3D elements on. So hopefully my little tour, our journey here, will help us get there. So let's start fresh, starting from scratch. Well, starting from this giant JPEG from Adobe stock, right? This is one of the things from the free collection. There's a lot of cool city maps over there. And all right, good. First pronunciation with the long A. Okay, perfect. All right, so we've got our map, right? Grab that, and you could grab this. You could use a screenshot from Google Maps. Doesn't really matter, but you want a map. And if we're talking about source files to work from when it comes to map, strip away a lot of the unnecessary information, like articles and prepositions, I guess. But from this map, right, we don't need to label every street. We don't need to label every building. And in fact, if this is meant to be an infographic of some kind, we want to really tightly control what information we're even presenting to an audience. So strip off everything that's superfluous. When you go to when you're going out for a walk, take off one accessory. When you're going to make a map, take off all the accessories. So we're going to take our big map. This is massive. This is 3,400 by 4,000, etc. You can see up here in the info zone. Drag that on down into its own composition. Now, I'm going to just drag this out here, and we'll put it in a new folder so that we can enjoy that new folder. And I think what we're going to do is, first off, we're going to change our screen layout here so that we can enjoy that. Let's close that panel. Let's close that panel. Now my face is down in the corner. Hopefully that's going to be good. So we've got this massive composition now. And we're going to do all of our two-dimensional things in this, and then we'll orbit around that. So let's say, for example, we wanted to take a journey from up here in this corner, and we're going to come down to the water over here, right? So I'm going to grab my pen tool. I'm going to make sure I have nothing selected. I'm going to make sure that there's no fill happening, and I'm going to make sure that there is going to be a nice bright pink stroke happening. And I'm just gonna click around with nothing selected. You see my cursor has a little star on it. That means I'm making shapes. And so we are just clicking in here, drawing path, making shapes, going on a journey. Now these are major roads. I don't think we're actually supposed to be walking on them. But let's not let the verisimilitude of the situation get in our way, right? And I'm just clicking around. And right now, Evan, there's no line. Well, that's because the stroke here needs an amount of thickness. So if your line looks like that, always check your contextual bar up at the top to see what is going on. Let's call this the path. You can rename layers by simply hitting the Enter key and typing them out. And look at that, we got a nice static path. Oh, we nailed it. So good. If we wanted to animate this path, this is really step one, right? We want to animate this path. And so let's twirl into that. Let's twirl into the contents, twirl into the shape. And if you see right here, we got this button that says Add. You can click on Add, and you can say, let's add to this a trim paths, Trimothy paths. When you want to go for a walk, bring Trimothy paths. You can also use the Add menu up here in the contextual bar. And that's going to drop a trim paths into the contents. So we're going to twirl down into that. You can see as I change this property, this end property, it is going to be taking away or adding, trimming more or less of this. Now, I don't know if everyone calls it the contextual bar there, Umacorn, but I call it the contextual bar because it contextually changes to what tool we're using, right? And so we are now going to select the end. I'm going to set a keyframe on it. You click the stopwatch. Now there's keyframes in the world. Keyframes are appointments for properties, and here at 23 frames, the end is going to be at 0%. If I scrub ahead on the timeline to a new time and adjust that property, a new keyframe is converted or is placed into the world, right out there in the world, a new appointment, and After Effects is going to make up the difference between the two, changing in between where things are at. So if we play this through, look at this, we can enjoy this path coming on. Right now it's coming on in a very linear way, so I'm going to select these, I'm going to right click on them, Animation Assistant, Easy Ease, or you can tap F9, or if you are very, very cool like me and you have a mouse with a lot of buttons, you might map F9 to one of those buttons so that you can click it all the time. Sorry, I'm going to have to drink some tea. I gotta keep my voice kind of lubricated. Now, when you're animating paths, if you're making a two-dimensional map, man, we're almost halfway done, right? So let's say, for example, this is the path you're happy with. But what we want is to give a bit more of a meter or a cadence to the movement. If we were drawing this, like let's say we were actually drawing this with a pen, we would actually be stopping or hesitating or resting more at corners, especially tight corners. So here, we're going to come into the corner, and I'm going to set a keyframe there. And if I scrub this value here, you can see that it's going forward and backward. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to scrub the value so that it's like right there. And right click on this, and we're going to say Keyframe Assistant, Easy Ease this one. And if I enter the graph editor with this button, and we enter the speed graph, this is how fast the property is changing. And so because we've eased that middle one, we are going to come to a rest, and then it'll keep going. But it doesn't have to completely come to a rest. Double click on this, I'm going to say, let's continuously lock, let us lock those values together. So now I can drag this up a little bit. And now it doesn't come to a rest, but it does slow before moving on. So if you want to put those things in, mercy. And Steve, thank you for the excellent stuff here. Excellent medical suggestions from the chat. That's what I like to see. So right here, right, we've got this bump off of the baseline, and that way it won't come to a total stop. It'll just kind of hover for a bit, right? It'll slow and then keep going. Whenever you want to get things that feel smooth, right, you probably want to come into the graph editor and manipulate things here. Now, Oscar, you know the only MMO I play is Penguin Club? Um, probably not. I don't know if that's still relevant. Neopets? Maybe not. So we've got our path. The path is moving. I love it. This is great. But we want a camera to look at and follow this path. So let's rename this whole thing. Let's call this the 2D map, right? And to make our lives easier here in the 2D map, I'm going to, with nothing selected, tap the asterisk key. I'm going to hit the U key first to bring up all the keyframes. And I'm going to set markers here and here, right, at these 2 points. Because then when I create a new composition, and this new composition is going to be 1080 by 1080, a nice social media square to put out in the world. And let's go ahead and we're going to hit OK on that. So in this square, let's call this the export, and our new folder. If I drag the 2D map and I plop it down here, you can see that we've got these 2 markers on there that are telling me when the action starts and stops. So that's going to help me to deal with our timing. You can see, oh yeah, there's the little line. Well, we want to do something 3-dimensional with this. Step 1, let's make this thing 3D. The layer is now 3D. And you can tell because it's got a little gizmo on it. And I'm going to go New Camera. And I'm going to go with a 35mm preset. Now, these are just like regular cameras. It's simulating real cameras in real life. You're probably going to be using something like a 35 or a 50 or an 80. All the properties of real cameras and real lenses are being demonstrated here. And 35, 50, 80, these common focal lengths, these common diameters and such, these are all going to be pretty common to your work. If you want something with a wider kind of field of view, more of a fisheye thing, if you want something more telephoto, right? If you want to really compress your 3D elements. Anyway, I don't want to get too far in the weeds. But we now have to navigate around our 3D world. And you can do that by hitting C to cycle through your camera tools. Or what I recommend is actually hitting 1, 2, and 3 on your keyboard. And that'll give us our orbiting, our panning, and our trucking. Oh, I can never get these words right. But one thing I want to say is if we are going to try to navigate around this world thusly, it feels a lot like this is like a big wall and our camera is looking at a wall. I want it to feel like a floor and for it to move like a floor. Therefore, I'm going to take this object here. I'm going to call up its rotation and I'm going to swing this thing flat to the floor. So we're going to go say 290 here like that. And in fact, with its position, I'm going to bring its position way down. I'm going to bring the position down to 1080. So it seems like it's sitting on the floor. And you may find that this actually helps with your camera controls and that it's going to feel a lot more as you would expect to actually be able to orbit and move things around. Another thing that might really help you out is if we double click on the camera here, I've created what's called a 2-node camera. A 2-node camera has both a position where it is in the world and it has a point of interest, a thing that it looks at. So it must always look at its point of interest, and if you were to move either of these, the angle of the camera is making up the difference between them. This is really critical because it's actually how we humans make use of camera. We point it at a thing we want to look at, as opposed to the way the machine makes use of cameras, which is the specific angle of the gimbal that it's on. We can control it both ways. If you prefer it the other way, go to a 1-node camera. We're going to use 2-node today because with 2-node cameras, it's actually a lot easier for us to use the navigational tools. You'll notice that when I click out, there's a little crosshair out in the world. That is the point at which I'm orbiting around. And if you don't see, for example, you see that my scene is cut off around the outside here. If you don't see the things that you want to look at because they're just beyond your vision, I want you to go to draft 3D like this, and I want you to turn on the extended viewer, right? So you can go kind of around like that. And Oscar, I am right there with you. A parallel camera would be, chef's kiss. A non-real camera is so cool to play with, to do like visually interesting stuff. Anyway, so we're gonna get into here, and we are going to find where the path begins, and I'm just going to use my navigation controls to move us to that point, right? So that we're right here. Maybe we want a much more kind of top-down version, kind of like this. I'm going to There we go. I've found where I want to be. And so we're going to go like that. Okay. So this is the first place, right? And then the path is going to come on and it's going to start getting away from us. So what I'll do is in the camera here, there are two properties that we need to keyframe. This is really critical. This is mission critical stuff. If you're using a 2-node camera, make sure that you are setting keyframes on point of interest and position. Because if you set it on one and not the other, we're going to be moving the camera, but the other thing is going to remain locked in the universe and stuff's going to get weird. So if you're using a 2-node camera, keyframe both, says Evan. So here, right, the thing's taken off, and I'm going to set those two keyframes to be here at the beginning when the line is taking off. And now, at the end, let's go find where we're going. Where'd you go? Oh, where'd that thing go? Now, our final kind of look of the thing, we don't want to just follow the path over here. And if you wanted to do that, that's totally fine. You can see that we go kind of like that. I want to use these tools to kind of orbit us more three-dimensionally and kind of split the difference because I'm trying to show the audience where we go. You know, maybe this is an episode of Travel Man, the best travel documentary program ever put on television. And this is what I want to try to frame up, right? This is the journey that Richard Ayoade takes as he goes around with a celebrity. And so now we're going to have this type of movement from this position to that position, right? The position and orientation that are held by the point of interest and position. We're going to ease those. I'm going to ease both of those by doing that hitting F9 deal. And let's go into the graph editor and so that we can see how this looks. Yeah, that's looking okay, I'll say. But I want to grab these handles and I want to give them a pull like this so that it's starting and stopping, you know, with this more concave feel. So it's ramping up a lot slower before it really starts to go and then slows down, you know, it slows down slower, right? The change of speed is less dramatic. And more to that point, why am I lining these two things up like a robot, right? I can offset them so that maybe it starts moving before the point of interest starts to change. So the camera's in movement, and then the point of interest is changing, and we come to rest at the same time. Or maybe they both don't come to rest at the same time. Maybe those are offset a little bit, and we'll see how that looks. When you're playing around with your motion, I want you to really think about these things and really play around with them. This is one of the joys of keyframed movement, right? That we can just, if I don't like it, I can just move that keyframe. I don't like how it's getting from one to the other. I'll just tweak the curve, right? Nothing's set in stone. Just like if we were sketching, we're going to sketch lightly and then ink over it later. It's all sketching. Right? This is all nebulous until we lock it in. And that only happens when you hit render. There's so few destructive tasks in After Effects. Not that I spend all my time tooting the horn of After Effects here, but you know, it's what we're doing on the program. So here we go. I'll say that this type of thing is pretty good, right? We really start to move when the path has sort of hit the boundary or the edge of the frame, which to the audience will say, I got to see where that path is going. Follow that path. And so that's exactly what we're doing. So he's like, oh, where's that going? Okay, good. At least we're giving it more space. Oh, thank goodness. A little bit of dramatic tension in how that thing's moving. Now, a couple other things that I want to cover. I know we don't have a lot of time. If you download the work file, you're going to see the final version of this that has a bit more bells and whistles. It's got signs. It's got labels out there in the world. If you want to place objects out in the space, it's not that difficult. Let's put some text out there. So I'm going to just Command T, drop some text, and let's say, I'm just going to write the word Spain, exclamation point. I'll be traveling to Madrid, Spain shortly myself in February. So if you're in Spain, hey, let me know. Let's hang out. But I want this to appear like it lives out here on the map somewhere, right? So I'll close that panel, close this other panel. I don't really need those panels all the time, guys, because you can access them elsewhere. But with these things, I want this to be 3D. So I'm going to click the 3D button and the layer is gone. Where has the layer gone? So let's bring our extended viewport back on. Where did you go? Where could it be? So the important thing to remember is that it is currently living at 540, 538, right? And that's not where we're looking. That's not where the camera is looking. So in order to bring this to somewhere that I'm really looking at, I'm going to hold down Shift and parent this to the 2D map. So that's going to stick this basically at the anchor point of this layer that I already know about. And this is really helpful because now it's pretty easy for me to just drag this kind of along the ground here a little bit, and to get this sort of into a position that would be helpful. Use the arrows here to try to drag this around, and maybe I'll use, there we go, we'll use that to stand it on up. And let's scale this thing up like so. And let's see, let's try to get this into an alignment, something like over here. Grow it quite large. There we go. We'll put it like that. Right. So pull back and observe this. Now, the important thing when you're moving stuff around in space, right? We can move it selectively by pulling each arrow and get these exactly where we want. You could instead, up here, up at the top, we can switch into world axis mode, which means these axes are aligned to the world, not to the object. And we can switch into camera axis mode so that all of this gizmo is oriented to the viewer. So depending on how you prefer to work and how you need to understand the model and where it is in the world, I hope that's going to be working out. I'm going to pretend that says Sweden. I think we all know the road systems of Scandinavia are very different from other parts of the world. I'd love to go to Oslo sometimes. I don't know. So much wonderful architecture and such. Anyway, so here's what we want to do. All right, we got this thing moving. We got it grooving. It's going around. I'm going to work on a couple of stylistic things that I think will help with people's presentations. So let's get out of draft 3D mode for a minute. In the third dimension, when dealing with cameras, we can deal with something called depth of field. If I click that on, it's not going to be particularly pronounced out here. So what I'm going to do is really crank. I'm going to over crank that. Depth of field, things that are off of the focal plane are going to be blurry. Things that are at the focal plane will be sharp. This allows us to bring things in and out of focus, and we can keyframe the focal length, focal distance, sorry. Oopsie doodle. Cancel, undo. So we can modify all that stuff. Real camera stuff. But I want to come back to the example, because I know we're running out of time here. I have on here an adjustment layer, and this adjustment layer is using an effect called camera lens blur. And if I toggle this on and off, you can see that this is providing a type of blurriness that is closer to what we would call a tilt shift. Now, a tilt shift makes things look small and toy-like, creating a kind of artificial depth of field situation. Now, tilt shift, I think, is really interesting, especially for our maps, because it allows us to blur out information that is not relevant to whatever we're talking about, and to selectively do that. Now, how do we do it? Step one, apply camera lens blur to an adjustment layer. Place that adjustment layer over everything, right? Think of it like a lens that we're dropping down over top of the camera, our tilt shift lens that we're producing. And then we need to define a map. We need a blur map. And I'm pointing to this map right here. So if we just solo this, this is a layer that is simply a shape layer. It's got a gradient on it. It's got a fill that goes from dark to light to dark again. The light part in the middle, but you could do it the other way around. You could do dark in the middle, light on the edges. You just need to delineate a grayscale in here. And with this, it means that with a map, we're going to be able to say something is happening here, but nothing is happening here. Or the opposite, right? Something is happening out here, nothing is happening here. That's what maps are good for. And I can apply, say, a curves on top of this, and that can help me get a little bit more fine control over that. So default is this. Curves brings us up to that. So using that as a map, right? That is adjusting, what is blurry, what is not. So anywhere that is dark, because I've inverted that blur map, right, is blurry. Everything that is in white is crisp. And that is producing this kind of tilt shift vibe to this. Remember, it's not real blur. It's not a real camera. It's not a real focal distance. It's just where the thing happens to be in our frame. And that allows us to say, hey, I'm going to put all my labels kind of in the middle center. Let's make that the crispest part, even if they are not actually physically in the world close to each other. So thanks for hanging out. Thanks for making maps with me. I hope I've shown you the way to do something good here. If you want to get deeper into it, please download the project files. Get your hands on the project files. See how this is constructed. Take it apart. Do what you like with it. What I'd love to see, if you can just share with me your work. I want to see paths and maps and going places. Use the maps provided. Bring your own maps, bring your own JPEGs. Go on down if you're at any kind of tourist trap and they've got a big map on the table. Take a picture of that and use that. And then share it with me in the Discord. Come into the Discord. Links to all that stuff is in the description, and share your stuff with me. I want to see what you make. And we'll be talking about everything that people make on Friday. We got a bunch of stuff from last week's challenges to look at, but we'll be looking at everything on Friday. So I hope I see you there. Devlin, you're lost. Oh no! Map was not as good as I had intended. Anyway, we have a rich full day of stuff still going on here on Adobe Live. I've been Evan Abrams. Thanks for being with me while you can. I'll see you tomorrow for more. Same time, same channel. So until then, be creative, stay kind to each other, and I will see you all around the internet. All right, bye for now.